Um, the earlier question about organic versus non-organic or conventional. Organic nutrient supplies are extremely important. Circular economy, recycling the nutrients, but they very, very seldom provide the balance that any individual crop needs. So you need to get the best out of that crop, they need to be topped up with something else. That something else may be another organic input, like we were looking in the Ugandan part of this project a couple of days ago at biochar, which is very rich in potash, but useless for nitrogen, and chicken manure, very rich in nitrogen, not wonderful in potash. Okay, we're not putting it. We also saw this in Kenya, that with regard to amaranth there, the input of farmyard manure gave plants with fat stems and small heads. The input of synthetic fertilizer gave plants with big heads and thin stems. And the farmer said, well, why don't we try half and half? And so the farmers decided that, hey, presto, yeah, we had in those experiments amaranth with fat stems that held up to fat heads. Thank you, farmers. You've decided far better than the ivory tower researchers. That's my message about the policymakers, and let the farmer decide.
Thank you very much, Fred. And on this, the farmer decides, yes, and we've seen the farmers giving us input on what is the best tasting. But from a processing perspective, I think we still need to do some work, because it could be good in the farm, but how about during processing? What are the challenges there? Okay, there's a question that you had already.
Those men, women, smallholder farmers, right? So, but when I see the report or the findings, you're just giving us like as smallholder farmers in general. For example, for the challenge or barriers, you report that the challenges are this and that. But as we know that women farmers and also men farmers have a different challenge when they do, especially the female-headed households. So I really wanted to see whether you consider that and do some kind of analysis on that. The second one is for the Dr. Talab. You have been saying around the stunting, especially specific to Ethiopia, there is stunting reduction around hierarchy in the eastern part, and I really wanted to know what's the reason behind that, so that we learn from that area and implement for the other. Maybe in general for the project, like how do you address women farmers in the project when you do any capacity building, trainings, or all that? I really wanted to know. Thank you.
Frankly speaking, in terms of this specific value chain study, there was no gender-specific aspect or question separately or demarcated, but throughout the project, we follow a strict gender proportion. For example, during training, we invite husband home, even gays and fathers, they fully participate in terms of age as well as sex aspect.
And I remember some nice pictures to see the women in the fields carrying babies also. So they, even those who have children, came with them. So thank you very much for that. And then there was the issue of stunting. If Khalid could address that, and then the question will come from the two ladies at the front after. So the issue of stunting you showed in the map of Ethiopia. Some changes.
Yes. So the map was showing the areas that have a prevalence of about 30% in red, about between 20 and 30 in orange. So the orange shaded ones may be passed from something like 40% to within the 20 to 30% range. But that doesn't mean that these were the areas where the highest reduction were observed, because some areas started with 60-65% of stunting, going to 40 or 30%. That's 30% reduction. But you will still see them in red. because they're still above that threshold of serious public health concern of 30%. So that's one caveat with the presentation, with the picture. But the decomposition studies on stunting that were done in this country through using different panels of DHS show that the strengthening of the health system, that includes nutrition education through the health system, economic GDP increases, per capita increases, etc., were primarily driving the reduction in stunting, including improvements in wash water sanitation.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. There are some questions.
Mr. Nyanse, in Amhara region, he said that the processors are not only, they don't process the food, but rather provide the service. So my question is, what would be the incentive for these processors to engage in the actual processing and value addition of a product, because availability and affordability and at the same time constant supply is required for a processor to engage in value addition. So shelf life is a matter, and at the same time availability, constant supply of the agricultural product is also an important element. Post-harvest wastage is also a serious concern. So what is the plan to address this kind of thing? The second question I have is on the rural-urban dichotomy, especially on dietary practices. Rural communities are food producers, and yet they are much more suffering from food consumption, especially they are stunted and at the same time wasted compared to the urban communities. What is it? The major reason, and what needs to be done, given that they are food producers? We know the culture in the rural areas, they don't really feed their children, but they rather probably serve other community members. They are considered hospitable, but they don't really feed themselves. So what needs to happen there? What kind of behavior change needs to happen? The other question has been raised by my colleague on engaging women, be it in the whole value chain, but at the same time in bringing about a change in the dietary practices, both in the urban and rural community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Address about the processors providing their tasks as a service, but is there any incentive that they can or can be utilized to ensure that they are involved in value addition and also have constant supply?
Thank you very much. During the survey, we noticed that processors will give service only, as I said. So, yeah, there are incentives to participate private sectors in processing as well as packing and scaling as a business. And we have the plan to give training policies. And as you said, the problems are also supply of food, the price issue, the legality issue, the packing, shelf life of the product. And it's common for legumes, for the processed as we call it abandonment, but it's possible to do that business model for tape as well as for waste. The different products can be made from waste as a two process pack and sale, but it needs some improvement in terms of raw material supply as well as the knowledge gap. There is also the knowledge gap and shelf life as well as the basic technological issue will be addressed. So there's a role so that we are planning activities towards that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And as Khalid comes to address the issue of this rural-urban difference, Khalid, and as you come, just to also mention the increasing demand is one of the ways that we can make sure that our processors get active. So if we can have a very good increase in demand for these grains and good quality grains, as we increase the yields in the fields, if we can get very good demand in markets for some of the products that are being developed, I believe we can see some more processing taking place. But Kalia, please, rural, urban. Guys in the rural area are producing food yet having issues in stunting, for example. Urban area, they're overeating. What is going on here?
It has to, of course, rural areas are producing primarily cereal staples, so not every food group that is required. Then that is what is being distributed in urban areas. Also, again, driving is a type of diet that the urbans are consuming, with the addition of less physical activity in the urban areas. So it's not the fact of over-consuming, but it's consuming largely staple-based diet with limited physical activity taken from the production of the rural areas. That's the kind of context that's driving this different forms of malnutrition in both areas. But it's also important to recognize that in Ethiopia we still have a very low overweight obesity rate in rural areas, but in many other countries we see that much of the increase in overweight obesity comes from the sharp increases in overweight obesity in rural areas. One thing that we need to be wary of is when these foods are no more available in sufficient quantities, you will have highly processed, highly sugary products at even cheaper price than their local production penetrating the markets. And then there's a potential of seeing a diet transition even in rural areas towards something that we don't want to see. That's a high processed food. So we've already seen anecdotes of this in parts of Wollo area, for example, where there's a high migration. They are exposed to, for example, diets in the Middle East, etc. And once they come back, that's been considered as, in that relatively developed country that we visited, this is highly consumed. And so whenever you've got sugary foods penetrating in rural areas, they're taken up quickly. So it's still at the infant stage, but we need to be wary of it. So yeah, it's a complex problem that requires complex solutions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And just to add again, it's the affordability question here that we go back to. If the healthy food will be affordable and all our population is well educated and provided information through the efforts that we're making here, we can hopefully influence their choices towards more healthy options. Okay, another question.
Especially on the challenges reflected or presented by the management. I'm working for the Africa Association. We have worked for the last 30 years to increase production and productivity and increase harvest loss reduction. From the presentation, I saw that, for example, we did study in the urban area, there are challenges of mechanization, storage, and like that. This one we have implemented projects, but it is not only demonstrating that brings change or enhances adoption. Farmers has to access that technology. We have to create a way where farmers access the technology so that they can adopt. They can adopt by purchasing if it is the price is low, or they can get the service from the service providers. For example, for mechanization technologies, what we have done was we are organizing groups, rural groups, 3 or 4 of them together. We train them. We try to link them with fabricators of these small threshing sharing technologies so that they can go around and give service to the farmers. So we have to create that type of opportunity for farmers to access the technology. Otherwise, demonstrating and not creating the demand or not responding to the demand of the farmers is nothing. So my idea is for InnoFood, as we presented, we are not going to share this study and we are going to look for source of funds for collaborators. So in that case, we have to see how we bring or how we create demand, how we create access for farmers to access the technologies that was demonstrated previously, or that is going to be demonstrated if it this any area. Because like we mentioned, kicks back, we have demonstrated in that area. We have tried to create like agro leadership with youth groups, but you cannot reach all the areas as the country is big. In that case, we have to look how to create access if the technology is not new in that area. If the technology is new, we have to collaborate with research and we have to demonstrate to the partners. But side by side, we have to create access. That's what I wanted to mention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. They can have this, not just on a short term, but continuously. So thank you very much for that comment. I want to address, by the way, the issue of gender. I know it has come up. In Ethiopia, for example, 48% of the farmers we're working with are women. And we, of course, understand that it's not just their participation that is enough, but this is a very complex issue. In fact, even the EU has been questioning us, is it just participation? What more are we doing for the women? So again, this is an area we're looking for collaboration with social scientists to really understand the gender issue and the gender challenges and how a project like this can be able to address them more appropriately. Thank you for that. There was a question from the gentleman here. Yes.
Thank you so much. The introduction to forms, so this is very much appreciated. Maybe as you rightly mentioned, the gender was a little bit not well addressed, but in terms of analysis. But let me start with my questions, because I have questions for each one of the presenters. Let me start with Dr. Patras on the first presentation. So you come up with a very intensive set of constraints and challenges that face value chains here. But to what extent this could be expressing at a country level? Because I noted that most of the study coming from one side and another region, so I don't know whether it would have been possible to take some other region as well to come up with a comprehensive picture of the value chains in Ethiopia. And my second question to you as well is it would have been interesting as well to capture the larger scale farming. I mean, specifically not the larger scale, but in areas where there's a dynamics between the small scale and larger scale. Because I knew with this one comes a model that we call it outsourcing. So it might be those constraints that you have depicted might be a little bit changed. So going to the second, Dr. Caleb, and the second presentation, which was so much intensive, full information, and it even managed to provide a picture for nutrition at the continental level, actually at the sub-Saharan level. And I like it very much that you classified the nutrition into 4 classes, going all the way to healthy food. For your information, 75% of African population cannot have the money to get healthy food, which has to do with food security. And this brings us to the affordability issue. It's not only about having high yields, but it's how having high efficiency at every node of the value chain of the food system as a whole. This is one aspect. And the other aspect that we very much advocating is we needed to strengthen what we call intra-Africa trade. This is based on what we know as regional value chain models. Each country to specialize in the production of crops that have comparative advantages. If you look at the USA farming system, it has that belt systems. If you go to the south, there is cotton. If you go to the up north, this is maize. This is based on belts of comparative advantage, and this is exactly what we need to have in Africa. So I have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Caleb. The first one is, I think you've addressed this in your diagnosis. You concentrated in 2 cities, Alasa and Addis Ababa. So where's the urban here? I mean, it should have been addressed, because even in the slide just before, you presented a huge difference between nutrition between the urban and the non-urban and the rural areas. My second question to you is, in the use of the linear programming to come up with the optimized diet, it's I assume, I'm not very much professional to this one. I used to do linear programming, but I'm agriculture economics by default, but linear programming nutrition, this is something that is quite new to me, and I don't know, you assume that there's a linear relationship between the variables and co-variables, And maybe, I don't know, because see, nutrition is a little bit complicated. It has, as you know, it has 4 dimensions, quality, diversity. So if you want to do a linear dimension.
Yeah, value chain is a very well issue, but unfortunately the value chain aspect of the producers was only collected on 2 districts, only 2 districts in Ethiopia. But some part of the value chain aspect as policy issues at large level, large processors data was collected at our level. Otherwise, this locality constraint is, but as most of the challenges and constraints we can conclude that our researchers view, I think it is a problem of all producers as well as processors. Otherwise, it is a scope of the study and it depends on the project. It has its own financial, human as well as constraints.
About the large-scale farmers.
Oh, yes.
So you asked about the large-scale farmers.
Exactly. In some areas in Ethiopia here, there is coexistence between larger scale farmers and small scale farmers. So this could be like analyzing the interaction between both of them could yield to exciting results. Because this is a model that could be upscaled at a country.
Oh yeah, in Ethiopia, almost most of the farmers are small scale farmers. Large scale farmer is common in lowland parts of the country. Otherwise, in the highland as well as the midland area, large scale farmers are not common. But in the lowland area, in the case of sesame, rice, wheat, common. Otherwise, in terms of sweet potato, probably maize, I think in parts of Amhara, I think in some parts there may be maize, but almost smaller other farmers is common.
Yeah, thank you also for that comment, because maybe that's something as a project we could do is map out, as I said, we're looking for stakeholders, look who are doing it on large scale and see what kind of interaction we could have with them. Then you had some questions on nutrition. So linear programming was one part of this, and I think there was another question on affordability as well, so please.
Okay, thank you. Those were a nice set of questions. First one is, yes, we have different scopes in the different analysis presented. On the secondary analysis, we used all urban areas in Ethiopia, but also within the sub-region, the sub-Saharan African region, because we have the data from multiple urban sites as defined by the Central Statistics Agency of a certain cutoff of population living within a certain density. Then we use that definition of urban to see what's going on between urban and rural. But then for the diet, for the food consumption survey, because it's quite a heavy work and it requires a lot of budget, then we had to make a choice. And so the choice was based on what's available from previous consumption surveys. A lot of it represented the rural areas, so then we have information about rural consumption better than urban consumption. But then for the urban areas, then we wanted to also have a continuum of a primary and a secondary city to give us an idea as Awasa, for example, 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, if it takes the same pathway as Addis, well, what is expected? So a bit of projection, although whatever projection is always, it's not always accurate, but it gives us an idea by urbanicity what to expect. So it's largely had to do with budget issues, and then the choice has to be made to prioritize the consumption to few urban areas alone. And then the linear programming, we use it more and more in nutrition nowadays. The idea is to solve a linear programming model where you would put different constraints. One of the constraints is, for example, meeting energy nutrient needs. Another constraint would be it has to be at the cheapest possible way. It has to be accessible. It has to be within the portion size limits. Because you could ask a person to eat a kilogram if they will reach there, but then you want to make sure that the portion sizes are maintained. A realistic portion size is maintained. So for this kind of complex issues, linear programming has been used and is quite useful, and that's how we're using it. One, to optimize the diet, but also at a smaller scale for formulation as well, even for a food. A given food, if you want to formulate it, then you could also put those constraints and then it supports the formulation. I know that there is not enough time for more questions, but I was asked a question if I could briefly talk about, we've seen urban, rural, but how about wealth, how about women education, etc. So in the secondary analysis, we had the privilege to look at the associations between, looking at the drivers. We looked at women education, wealth, urban, rural, sex differences, etc. And we know that wealth, women education, urban, rural, living in urban area are some of the major drivers of consumption and therefore malnutrition. And then by the same token, just to mention that gender issues are really important when talking about food and diet. We looked at the trends of diet diversity for children across the different DHS rounds, and looked at whether women empowerment, defined as women education, decision-making power, etc., as an index, it represented 16% of the differences in diet quality improvements for children. So it is critical also to ensure that whatever we do within the food system is done in a way that empowers women, because it has a direct link with how the child is fed, how the child is given care, etc., for obvious reasons. But then also, surprisingly, I think it's important to also address depression. We looked at maternal depression, and we see that maternal depression can influence what's being given, the care and the food that's given for the child. And in food insecure conditions, the depression rates are quite high. So it's all interlinked, as you can see, and therefore the need to have a multi-sector coordination.
Okay, thank you very much, Khalid. I know we're running out of time, but you had a couple of, could you have 3 more questions? How many could we address? You're there.
Okay. Yes.
We can take them? Okay, so these 3 last questions will be addressed. I know there are some questions on the chat line for Paulos. Please address that to how to directly, and also Raya wanted to know from the audience if you have a feeling that we are in the right direction, and maybe that can be done as a feedback from participants to us concerning this. But please.
Yeah, thank you so much. My first question to Paulos. This is what we were expecting from you. So to guide our private sector, persons around us. To reflect one small question, you talked about sweet potatoes, and you took some breeds, if I remember, you took some breeds from sweet potatoes here, and you improved it for high acidity there. So my question to you is, there is a center in Africa that's called, I don't remember the exact title, it's called Sweet Potato, and they have managed to come up with very good sweet potato breeds that are bio-fertilized. So I would imagine if you would have taken those breeds and do the tolerance for acidity, this would be like getting 2 birds with 1 stone. That guy, that team won the Nobel Prize on food security in Africa here. So, and my last question to you, Mr. Moderator, because you receive many questions. I like it very much the way that you approach this and the models that you directed to bring all the stakeholders. But maybe there's something that is missing here, because we would have loved to have farmer associations represented here. UN agencies, FAO, World Food Program, UNIDO, they would have been very much interested in the work that you're doing. It's the private sector representatives, processors, traders. We would have loved to see them, because those are the ones that are going to be picking up your results and put it into implementation. Thank you so much.
To accept the test of all the food prototypes that will be developed by the partners, that ultimately will lead to the commercialization of each product. So our product, the product developed by GetSargo and AU, we will follow that path. Therefore, shall I address Baptu's question?
Yes, you can address it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Abtu, thank you for the questions. His first question was why we need to worry about gluten-reduced products. it's obvious that celiac disease is a problem. We don't have enough data to say that we have celiac disease problem in Ethiopia, but there are some preliminary studies conducted around Bishoftu area, 40 kilometers away from Addis, and there is a good chance that the children less than 5 years of age are facing celiac disease. So in the future, as population is increasing, we might have this problem. So whatever product we are targeting to improve, including this factor as important factor, is very important. That's why we are considering reduced or gluten-free products. Why you use freeze grind or lyophilization for your pre-treated flours? Because these are the experimental stage. We are now experimenting our pre-treatments. So the pre-treated flours need to be lyophilized. That's the idea of drying food products. But in the future, when we come up with commercial plan, we might have some technologies like fourth generation drying technologies like refractance window drying. But this is at experiment stage, so we have to use the ideal drying technology, which is freeze drying. Last but not least, why germination increases the mineral concentration? I think one gentleman raised this issue earlier, because the enzymatic activity might be enhanced during germination, like phytase activity, which aims to reduce the degradation of the phytate or the phytic acid, indirectly, which will increase the viability of the minerals. That one is what I can say. And the other specific questions I can write to how to. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much for handling that. And then, Fred, the sweet potato issue, but could be related to our founding work. That's what we want to.
Yeah, our acidity research is focused on flour, but Dr. Morgan has something to add.
Okay, thank you for the question. As InnoFood project is almost a 3 years project, we have no chance to make any kind of breeding program. So what we simply did was just picked few varieties from the national program, and they were present ones. Unfortunately, we included 2 varieties from Uganda, and the 2 other breeds were bred in Ethiopia to improve the dry matter content of orange flesh sweet potato, which was a drawback of adoption of sweet potato, because this low dry matter orange flesh potato was easily uptaken. So we have taken that breed, and that breed is a combination of the white and the yellow flesh. So we are able to conduct a breeding program. So we just picked a couple of varieties from the national program.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Morgan. And then the last question was to me, and really excellent, because we need to engage more stakeholders who can be able to see the value of the work that we are doing, and not just the sort of business side, but also the farmers, also policy, and also others. So this is something that I hope we will do. We still have another year coming where we would definitely want to do this, engage more with the stakeholders. It's also giving us a chance now to sharpen what we have, so that we have a clear direction as to these are the outcomes that we are now able to say, you can now come on board, and we would be interested to discuss further on how this technology can be taken up. But definitely you're spot on that. We need to do more on this to engage the stakeholders, and we look forward to that. So thank you very much for your time, and our coordinator, Ryan Lanto, as I said, will be interested to know your thoughts on whether we're moving in the right direction. Those are very good comments. Don't just demonstrate, make sure you have a way forward. Looking at the gender issues as well is something that has been brought up in this meeting that we need to address more actively. Thank you very much from my side.
Thanks so much. Now, there was one question that was raised about stakeholder engagement. Of course, we have done stakeholder mapping, and we have invited several stakeholders from various sectors, including the NGOs, national organizations, farm associations, private sector, and so on. And as you know, you invited, but most of them don't come to such events. So we'll try to approach them through other channels. We don't give up on them. We would say that surveys of findings, brochures and stuff like that. So we keep on engaging them. And also for this audience, I would like to announce that we have, as you know, we have the website www.InnoFoodAfrica.eu. We have a lot of resources in that website, of applications, communication products, fact sheets, manuals, blog articles, videos, and so on. So you can go and access those documents. And you get lots of information from there also. With those few remarks, I would like to call Dr. Tagore, who is the Director General of Amara Culture Research Institute, to close the session. Thank you so much.
Between you and your lunch, so long, I'll just make a few remarks. First of all, I'm really very much honored to be given this chance to give a concluding remark. I see that lots of work has been done in a very short time. The time was not also very suitable in many respects. We know that we had the COVID pandemic as the start of the project that had also its own influence on the way things went. But despite that, as I see from this presentation today, a lot has been achieved, and it's commendable, and everyone involved in this project should be congratulated, and I would like you to clap for yourself. Thank you very much. Yeah, the problem here in the continent, problem of food security, in general, the problem of sustainable food system is really a big challenge. We still have to go a long way in terms of achieving food security and nutrition, especially in some countries like Ethiopia and in some regions like the Amara region. We are really suffering from classic food shortage problems and malnutrition in a big way, and we are trying to address that from many perspectives. And projects like this can contribute a lot in terms of both understanding the problem very deeply and in directing solutions. And as it's presented here, it's a very complex problem and it needs a very complex solution. And there are a multitude of actors who are involved in this sector. Addressing food issue is not an agricultural problem alone. It goes beyond that. It involves the education sector as well. It should also involve the health sector as well. And many of those actors should come together. And I think in this regard, you have already established an innovation platform. I think that's a very important thing, because science has to be communicated to all those concerned, especially to policy makers, which can really make a difference. So I would like to stress on this point that whatever you are doing here should be communicated very well. And I know you have a strategy, and there is a work package working on it. And I know also that it's not an easy task. It's very tough. But it's the last mile that we need to address. Otherwise, you would end up with very beautiful papers and beautiful charts without actually doing something on the ground. So I want to stress that if you have a very strong innovation platform, you can establish it by yourself, or you can attach to one of the existing platforms, by the way. There are many platforms which address food and nutrition issues in this country. For instance, I know that there is one initiative called the Supporter Declaration Initiative, which is a very big government initiative to address nutrition issues, not only in Supporter region. The name It's just going because the declaration was made at all. Otherwise, it addresses nutrition issues all over the country. So we need to attach with these kinds of existing fora, which will help, deliver your message across scales. So that's what I would like to emphasize. Our engagement in this, my institute's engagement in this project was really very nice. We had a very good relation with many of our African partners as well as European partners. We want to upgrade this. We want to continue this kind of collaboration in the future as well. I expect that a sequel project will come as well, because I feel that many of the problems you cannot address everything in one project alone. So at the end of this project, you may find out that some important gaps that need to be filled, and if we can work together, it might be possible to get another sequel project so that we can address all the remaining issues. With this very brief remark, I congratulate you all. Thank you very much. And I feel honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you for keeping in touch. We'll also keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, online participants. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Fine. No,